There are some points within our lives where we will inevitably face our very own acid tests. Essentially, these are the trials that we experience when we are in a vulnerable and compromising state, both during our highest highs and our lowest lows. The tests measure our vigilance and ignorance, despite the luxuries we experience when we are well up the ladder in life. They also measure our resilience and perseverance despite the bleakness of our circumstances when we fall from grace. This is what we will all encounter during our self-improvement journeys, our extent to resist indulging in the onslaught of temptations and gratifications after an extensive period of personal growth and abstinence. Our extent to wanting to redeem ourselves when we do slip away, while at the same time getting overwhelmed with disappointments and regretful actions. The latter is exactly what falling off from your self-improvement journey feels like. The lustful urges to undergo a nuclear ejaculation after months of not indulging in such activities, then having to dwell in your failure after voluntarily giving in to your impulses. This is towards the thing that you initially sought to destroy forever. The cravings to quench our desire for all the palettes of taste within processed foods after months of undergoing body recomposition through lifting weights and eating clean but bland organic foods. Then having to withstand our never-ending compulsion to consume more of the devil's fruits once we've tasted them after a long while. The reason we fall off from our self-improvement journey is simple: we unconsciously become too comfortable for our good. We put ourselves in delightfully comfortable positions for way more and longer than necessary, and we forget to keep ourselves mindful of the circumstances surrounding us. For example, mindlessly and unconsciously scrolling through Instagram and encountering pictures and reels of attractive individuals. Getting invested for too much and too long into that, and then finding ourselves succumbing to impulses. Now, it is normal to want to reward ourselves after all the time and work that we put in to cultivate ourselves into a position or state we initially never thought was possible. However, we're humans, we always gravitate more towards pleasure than pain. It's no different when it comes to self-improvement. Our elevated sense of self-worth cultivated through self-improvement can turn on us if we underestimate the extent to which it can blind us from the seductive dark forces of temptations. Eventually, we are too late to realize that we've regressed far back to where we started. This is due to the snowball effect of one ignorant decision or choice. The worst part is the psychosis and superstitious extent of our disappointments and remorse for ourselves for our misconduct and failure. This tempts us even further to indulge ourselves deeper in all the gratifications that we initially wanted to avoid, especially in endeavors like retention and diet. The moment where your mind says, "What have I done? Can't believe I just did that. I'm such a failure," man, or any other similar thoughts, is the moment where your fall from grace begins. It's instinctual for us to seek any form of means, usually pleasure, to numb or get rid of the painful feeling that we are suffering from. The greater the pain and agony, the more we will be tempted to want to eliminate it as soon as possible, by any means necessary. That is why you find yourself engaging in a train of masturbation after relapsing on your year-long retention streak. That caused you to experience a cataclysmic level of self-accusation and self-condemnation like you've never experienced before. That is why you find yourself stuffing your mouth with candies, donuts, and ice creams after you realize that you've consumed more cheat meals and junk foods than you actually should or initially planned on consuming. That eventually caused you to spiral into an emotional whirlwind, despising your abilities and self-imposed ethics. It's that extreme feeling of revulsion and repentance towards ourselves that got us to experience our steep and deep fall from grace. That eventually leaves us in the pull of our tears and the ridicule of those gratifications that we ended up consuming more of. Rewards and gratifications are infinitely and endlessly seductive. They're pretty much like a seductive person in lingerie persuading you to come to bed and engage all day long. The moment you want to get up and go to work, they pull you back into bed, give a nice stroke, and you end up emptying your tank before the day even starts. Eventually doing nothing and going nowhere for the entire day, week, month, or year, This is especially important to note when you are well up the ladder in your self-improvement journey. All the temptations are pretty much at your disposal for you to relish. You must maintain a relatively high level of self-awareness when it comes to reaping your rewards, because one overstep slip can get you caught up in a seemingly comfortable but consequential downward spiral. This can happen in professional circumstances as well, where you get too comfortable and arrogant in your way. The quality or output of your work eventually sees a drop. One way to develop self-awareness is to become utterly self-critical. Constantly identify or point out your strengths and weaknesses, your tendencies and vulnerabilities. Do this without your fragile ego getting in the way of being brutally honest with yourself. The moment you feel like you are slacking or hesitating to put yourself even in a slightly uncomfortable position is the moment you must put yourself in an uncomfortable position, or at least a position where you aren't unwinding or loosening up to activate your sympathetic nervous system. For example, if one afternoon you look at the time and make a mental note to go to the gym in 2 hours, suddenly, out of nowhere, you start to feel doubtful, uncertain, or reluctant to go, thinking, should I go to the gym? Should I just skip this one session? It won't make much of a difference, would it? I'm already chill right now, and I don't think I want to get away from this. That is the moment you must effectively go to the gym immediately, or at least take a walk, or do an endeavor that engages your alertness and vigilance. The same thing applies to retention. The moment your mind entertains lustful thoughts and you find yourself starting to engage in unhealthy activities, that is the moment you should immediately divert your focus. Do 200 push-ups, submerge yourself in an ice bath, or do anything that gets you to become alert and not feel relaxed or complacent. I applied the same principle to my diet. At night, I often get sugar cravings. What I did to signal the ghrelin hormone to stop telling me that I was hungry was to chug 2 full beer mugs of water. This makes me feel full and quite nauseous. I have to admit, bad habits are a lot easier to develop than good habits. That is why they are a lot harder to unlearn or withhold. A lot of bad habits are natural animalistic impulses for us human beings. For those of us who do slip off the ladder and end up completely at rock bottom, or at least significantly far off from where we've fallen, this is where, at least personally, the real acid tests are going to be imposed onto our will, possibly more than ever before. The realization that we've basically tripped onto a landslide and regressed far back into the position where we first started is certainly not an easy feat to withstand. It's agonizing, heartbreaking, and morally damaging all at the same time. This is the part where I mentioned that engaging in a seemingly unbreakable sequence of indulgence and pleasures and gratifications to desperately numb or get rid of the agony will occur. Imagine experiencing the disappointments of your failure coupled with realizing that you have to do all the hard work all over again from the start. You have to experience all the pain all over again. For instance, if you're on a year-long quest to abstain from ejaculation and then completely relapse on the last day of the year, wouldn't you be disappointed in yourself? Initially, all the willpower you have to muster up to resist your natural impulses and all the work you've done to get you to that point in your goal, only to have all of it slip away at the last moment, is pretty soul-crushing, initially if I'm going to be honest. However, good news for you realistically, it's only your mythical, spiritual, and superstitious attachment to them that got you to think and feel that way. If you didn't go to the gym for 2 weeks, simply pick up where you left off. It's that simple because you haven't fallen that far off. If you don't go to the gym for 3 or 4 months and then have to start all over again, all your precious work will not be in vain. Sure, it will be as painful as when you first started, but your progress towards the stage or level that you left off will be much, much faster and easier than when you first started. This is because of muscle memory. This not only applies to your body but your brain as well. If you've learned and polished a skill and then had to forego that skill for a long while, You will initially be a little rusty and clumsy, but you've done this many times beforehand, so it won't take that long to get yourself back into the rhythm of where you left off. This is because your brain has already been periodically predisposed to that particular circumstance and stimulus. All you need to make sure is that you must not enter that morally self-depreciative state. Don't engage in those stupid, unnecessary, and mentally damaging negative conversations about yourself. These conversations do nothing but get you to underappreciate your efforts and denounce your potential. The road to redemption always begins with a reignited and deadlier form of determination. It doesn't begin with a darkened and lackluster form of disapproval over one's capabilities that has already been proven significantly. If you need to find the motivation to do it all over again, remind yourself of all the reasons why you started doing it. It may sound cliché, but take a moment to bring those reasons back into clarity. Impose them back into the forefront of your mind. If you find yourself thinking, "What's the point? I failed when I tried my hardest. Why should I bother trying again?" Well, this time when you do try, treat those temptations as your nemesis. Compile bad narratives about them and make them utterly noticeable to you daily. Post notes about them on a wall beside or in front of your workplace. When you acknowledge that you have mortal enemies, they could push you beyond the norm of sanity. You will be sharper and more focused than ever before. Losing or conceding to your enemies means that your dignity is as frail and worthless as your enemies mocked it to be. No man in this world wants to have his dignity utterly shamed in front of his beloved peers, especially those who believed in him. Improvement or development does not happen and will not happen within comfort and luxury. There are no circumstances to comprehend, adapt, and overcome. There are only circumstances to relish, benefit, and appreciate. Self-improvement is all about constantly putting ourselves in uncomfortable positions. It's a lifelong quest. It's not a momentary phenomenon to eventually seize in doing and then reap all the seemingly infinite rewards. It's without taking into account the consequences that come after it. Comfort breeds complacency. Complacency breeds ignorance. Ignorance breeds carelessness and stupidity. Thank you for watching.